Forgot my keys on the bus.
So what prompted me to watch Vulcanizadora is the Film Loner YouTube channel had mentioned it as maybe one of their favourite films of the year, or in their underrated films of the year. Also, Marcus Pinn on the James Hancock YouTube channel, where they did the roundup of their favourite films of the year. It was mentioned there, so that's what put it on my radar. I didn't really know anything about Joel Petrikis beforehand. And this was actually the first film that I watched on the 1st of January. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it so much so that over the following 2 days, I kind of watched Joel Petrikis' first 2 films. Vulcanizadora, I think it's best to kind of not know to know as little as possible about it. I think just going in expecting sort of like a slacker stoner hangout movie, and there's a gear change that kind of happens in the middle, which is kind of really thrilling, really. And for someone like me, Joel Petrikis is kind of, a bit of an inspiration, really. He just makes all of his films super independent, where he lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Vulcanizadora is shot on kind of a beautiful 16mm, but a lot of his early work was all just shot on prosumer DSLR cameras, so it's just that he's just got that real ethos of being really, kind of a DIY filmmaker. As a kid, I'd always seen sort of bits of Conan the Barbarian on TV, but never seen it the whole way through. And what prompted me to watch it now is I really like the animator Genndy Tartakovsky, and I listened to an interview with him recently, and he said how kind of his whole style really is almost entirely kind of based on the first 30 minutes of Conan. So that's kind of what prompted me to kind of finally watch it. And if you know Genndy Tartakovsky's work, watching Conan, you really see his how it's influenced him, not just in terms of like the design of some of like kind of the characters like armor and helmets and things like that, but also Genndy Tartakovsky has this really kind of stylized sense of time, and he like really kind of likes holding on poses, and you see that in Conan. There's a scene kind of really early on in Conan where Conan's mum, James Earl Jones, cuts off Conan's mum, and it's this whole kind of almost doesn't really seem, it seems it's not happening in slow motion, but it seems to be happening in slow motion in terms of you get James Earl Jones kind of really kind of looking slowly into the camera, and it's great. I love that. Yeah, just I think a lot of people now would say Conan's slow, but it's not slow. It just has this really kind of ethereal pace to it that you just don't really get in mainstream cinema now, and particularly not action movies. So that was really great to see. And Conan is a real kind of adventure film. It's got so many kind of bits to it where it's like always just moving forward. You have Conan as a kid where his village gets raided, and you have the whole thing of him, being a kind of a gladiator, and then him pretending to be a monk and infiltrating this kind of, snake cult. It's great. I really loved it. I was listening to the director of The Secret Agent on the Movies That Made Me podcast, but he said how Wake and Fright was kind of a really big kind of influence on all of his work. And it had been on my watch list to watch for a long time because it's a film that Scorsese really kind of champions, and it is great. I mean, the style in it is so kind of good and deliberate. It starts with this beautiful slow 360 sort of crane pan shot over the Australian outback, and then the film that ends with this insanely frenetic montage where it's cross-cutting between reality and imagination and all these kind of different moments and replaying scenes that you've seen from earlier in the film. So it really has a real kind of breadth of filmmaking on display, and I just really love that stuff. Kind of get anxiety thinking about how remote the Australian outback is even now when we've got the internet. So, thinking about what the Australian, what it would have been like living in the Australian outback in the 70s, I mean, it's kind of even more sort of terrifying, really. Both kind of, takes a swipe at sort of that Aussie bloke sort of culture, beer drinking, but then it's also a bit of an attack on that sort of elitist sort of snobbery about it, because, the lead character in Wake and Fright is not particularly likable. You're kind of compelled because he just gets kind of pulled further and further into this kind of really strange, weird scenario. Quest for Fire was a film I really didn't know anything about, and it came on my radar because I was watching a Letterbox red carpet interview, and they asked Ridley Scott for his four favourites, and he mentioned Quest for Fire. And I think when you watch live action films with with people pretending to be cavemen, you've just got a little bit of a barrier of entry because it's just a little bit comedic, or unintentionally comedic, because it's just been pastiched so often, really. So you do have to get over that. What really struck me about Quest for Fire is it just has some really phenomenal location work in it and some beautiful landscape photography. I mean, there's sort of a scene in it where they've got elephants dressed up as woolly mammoths in the Scottish Highlands, and just the logistics of that must have been a nightmare to pull off. But we're seeing this in a film that's sort of really got forgotten about now. But they would have done taken those huge undertakings for a film like that in the 80s, and it sort of made me sad that you'll never get films kind of doing things like that to kind of create spectacle now. And I just really applauded it, and Quest for Fire really stood out for that in terms of just the logistics to make it must have been insane.